Hello, fellow red flaggers. This is book 3 of 101 Red Flag Days. I hope you enjoy it. It may be a red flag when a sign in a U.S. store says we no longer accept American currency. It may be a red flag when your barber wears really dark glasses and a dog brings him his clippers. It may be a red flag when it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, but it's your doctor. Maybe a red flag when after counting the offering, your pastor changes the name of the church from Faith Temple to Faith Temporary. A little play on words. Maybe a red flag when you go out on a date with a girl that says she's single, but when some guy walks up, she yells duck. Maybe a red flag when you bleach your skin and straighten your hair to look like the very people you say you hate. May be a red flag when the deaf mute in the next seat is louder than you in praise and worship service. May be a red flag when your podiatrist has no feet. May be a red flag when a really tough bar has a 2-drink minimum on strychnine cocktails. May be a red flag when your doctor's handwriting is so bad that the pharmacists fill your prescription with insults instead of insulin. May be a red flag when you sit in front of your pastor in church on Sunday and behind him at the racetrack on Monday. It's bad. May be a red flag when a street sweeper driver dumps at the end of every block so his wife and kids can sift the dirt for change. Maybe a red flag when you buy your wife's Maybe a red flag when you buy your wife expensive perfume from a shop named Stanky Mays. Maybe a red flag when the pilot announces that there will be a 4-cocktail takeoff delay. Some of these are tongue twisters. Maybe a red flag when after a bad construction accident in Acapulco, midway through your arm reattachment surgery, everybody breaks for siesta. Maybe a red flag when you carry a ladder, paint, and a billboard to a sign language class. Maybe a red flag when you get on the bus and the driver asks you for directions. Maybe a red flag when Saturday is casino night at your church. Maybe a red flag when you enter a room, everybody gets quiet, looks at you, scream, point, and hurl things in your direction. Time to go. Maybe a red flag when you have mismanaged money all your life and think that winning the lottery will solve all your problems. Maybe a red flag when the only reason you passed an exam is because you copied off Forrest Gump. Maybe a red flag when all the residents of your ant farm have relocated. Maybe a red flag when your wife calls you on your cell to tell you that you are the only person on the maiden voyage of a remote control airliner. Maybe a red flag when people throw away their shoes after leaving your house. Maybe a red flag when your wife and your girlfriend get in a fight over your paycheck. Maybe a red flag when the sound of razor stubble scraping together can be heard all the way to the back of the wedding chapel when the groom kisses the bride. Ooh, makes me tingle. Skin crawl. Maybe a red flag when dogs run from you even with a pork chop tied around your neck. Maybe a red flag when you get so drunk that Willie the Wino refuses to be seen with you. Maybe a red flag when God was handing out brains, you thought he said planes and said, no thanks, I don't fly. Maybe a red flag when an armless jockey pulls alongside you in a race and asks you to whip his horse for him. Maybe a red flag when you call the suicide hotline, a priest answers, gives you your last rites, and hangs up. Maybe a red flag when members vote to change the name of your church from Mount Olive to Mount Martini. Maybe a red flag when you start the very first chapter of DASA, Drunks Against Sober Anything. Maybe a red flag when your surgeon asks, what do you want on your tombstone? Maybe a red flag when your klepto cousin asks you to take her to the store to pick up a few things. I don't want to go. Maybe a red flag when a dog actually says bow wow when it barks. Maybe a red flag when your feet are so big they arrive 5 minutes ahead of you. Maybe a red flag when a motivational speaker like Tony Robbins breaks down and starts bawling. Maybe a red flag when you shout so hard in church that the first 3 rows to the front and rear of you move back out of your way. Maybe a red flag when you're kicked out of the country club for wetting in the pool from the high diving board. Maybe a red flag when your psychiatrist asks if he may borrow some of your medication for a party. Maybe a red flag when the Geico caveman gets a ticket. Yep, no insurance. Maybe a red flag when your wife sleeps so bad that she's been court ordered to attend domestic violence classes. That's bad. Maybe a red flag when your uncle's police uniform is made up from 3 different foreign military branches. Maybe a red flag when your breath is so bad that God holds his nose when you pray. That's pretty bad. Maybe a red flag when you have a tattoo in Chinese that says, I'm an idiot because I have no idea what this tattoo says. I think I wrote something similar to that in one previous to this. Maybe a red flag when your grandpa mows his lawn that has no grass with his lawnmower that has no blade. Maybe a red flag when the elephant man says that he is unable to travel because he doesn't have a trunk. Maybe a red flag when you awaken to the sound of a very large growling dog in your bedroom and you don't have one. Maybe a red flag when you have so many excuses that they keep coming 20 minutes after you have gone. Maybe a red flag when you discover an elephant in your trunk without one. Maybe a red flag when the new shellfish platter at your favorite restaurant turns out to be chicken beaks stuffed with tuna. Maybe a red flag when your wife's domestic violence counselor tells her to bring in her doorknobs for therapy. Another tongue twister. Maybe a red flag when your wife changes from full of love Lucy to running over with hate Hortense. Maybe a red flag when a peeping Tom says, no thanks, I'm just looking. Maybe a red flag when you keep lusting and ain't got but one eye left. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe a red flag when the prince is so ugly you kiss him to bring the frog back. Maybe a red flag when Osama bin Laden's family names President Obama in a wrongful death suit. You know, they might even do that. Maybe a red flag when it gives me great joy every time someone does something stupid so that I can record it as another red flag day. I had something similar to that one too. Maybe a red flag when a person actually says boo-hoo when they cry. Maybe a red flag when you call 411 and the operator pumps you for information. Maybe a red flag when your feet stink so bad that your socks and shoes ran away with your wife and kids. Maybe a red flag when your pastor won't stand up and preach until his concealed weapons permit is renewed. Maybe a red flag when an all-you-can-eat buffet has your family portrait on their wall with a slash through it. Maybe a red flag when your cell phone loses signal every time the string on the tin can breaks. Maybe a red flag when your dentist has only 2 teeth, one in his mouth and one in his pocket, just like me. I got 3 though, I got 2 in my pocket. Maybe a red flag when you see an abandoned yellow truck parked on the White House lawn. Maybe a red flag when a nasty, neurotic, nervous, nearsighted night driver on a not so well maintained, never checked, nearly red tagged nitroglycerin truck has narcolepsy. That's pretty dangerous. Maybe a red flag when you hear the sound of loud music, toasts being made, and clinking glasses coming from the cockpit of an in-flight airliner. Maybe a red flag when you fall asleep in church and wake up chained to a post in the basement. Maybe a red flag when done busted a cap. Do-it-yourself bullet removal kits are on sale in ghetto convenience stores. Maybe a red flag when a policeman is still pumped about his promotion to the Mounted Patrol Division after he has been issued a stick horse. Excuse me. Maybe a red flag when a soldier is congratulated for hitting the target 2 out of 200 times. Maybe a red flag when a rookie policeman thinks Maybe a red flag when a rookie policeman thinks SWAT stands for sipping wine at Tina's. Maybe a red flag when your pastor's clothes have been out of style so long that the chain on his zoot suit is rusted in 2. Maybe a red flag if I get to calling and can't finish this. Maybe a red flag when the Bible says that God has the very hairs on your head numbered and can count them on one hand. Maybe a red flag when you snore so loud that the people at the monster truck rally down the street complain. Maybe a red flag when your arrest record is older than your wife's daddy. You old. Too old for her. Maybe a red flag when you've been waiting on the Lord so long that you forgot what for. Maybe a red flag when your TV is so old that your kids and your remote are one and the same. Maybe a red flag when you do something so stupid that Jesus is surprised. Maybe a red flag when your real estate broker has the same address as the local homeless shelter. Maybe a red flag when you fall asleep watching a cliffhanger and wake up tied to a train track. Some tongue twisters, boy. Maybe a red flag when the water in a restaurant is so brown that it doubles as tea. Maybe a red flag when your psychiatrist refers you to his psychiatrist's psychiatrist. Does that mean you triple crazy? Maybe a red flag when your fortune cookie says your wife's boyfriend is engaged to be married. Maybe a red flag when wisdom has thus far failed to inhabit your existence. Let that one sink in. Maybe a red flag when you spend time gossiping to people about a problem that have no power instead of talking to God who has all power. Get a clue. Maybe a red flag when your 18-year-old daughter's fiance was arrested for bootlegging during prohibition. He old too. Maybe a red flag when the elephant man looks drop dead gorgeous when he's standing beside you. Maybe a red flag when you are not mean because you're sick. You sick because you're mean. Let that one sink in. Maybe a red flag when the governor calls 5 minutes before your execution, but his watch is 6 minutes slow. You dead. Maybe a red flag when your wife has a post-dated death certificate with, "I want it to be a surprise," pencil in the box for the name of the deceased. Surprise me. Maybe a red flag when the sudden appearance of fresh meat at a homeless shelter coincides with the sudden disappearance of its oldest residents. Fresh meat. Maybe a red flag when half the time a person is preaching and the other half complaining. Yep, no victory there. Maybe a red flag when all your church's building fund has produced is a ginormous hate for building funds. You put a doorknob on the church. Maybe a red flag when you wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone washing dishes in your kitchen, but you live alone. Maybe a red flag when your fellow police officers have a pool on how soon you'll shoot somebody else, and another one on how many times. You're dangerous. Maybe a red flag when your head makes your hat look like a thimble on a broomstick. Maybe a red flag when you take a vacation to Danny DeMise's graveside hospice casino and resort with exciting activities such as eyeball rolling, speed depends changing, endurance drooling, and intercom yelling. Maybe a red flag when your dreams and goals do not require supernatural intervention. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Colorado Banner, signing off.